بسم الآب والولد والمنفس القدوس أحد واملك آمين. بسم الآب والولد والمنفس القدوس أحد واملك آمين. بسم الآب والولد والمنفس القدوس أحد واملك آمين. Good morning, blessed love. Hope everyone's doing good. Sorry, let's adjust that there. So we're in Exodus chapter 4, in the middle of the story of Moses, and Moses being instructed by God to go and see the Pharaoh and to free the people of Israel. So on with the reading, chapter 4. And Moses answers and says, if they do not give credence to me, nor listen to my voice, and say, Yahweh has not appeared to you. And Yahweh says to him, what is this in your hand? And he says, a rod. And he says, cast it to the earth. And Moses casts it to the earth, and it becomes a serpent. And Moses flees from his presence. And Yahweh says to Moses, put forth your hand and lay it on the tail of it. And Moses puts forth his hand and lays hold of it, and it becomes a rod in his hand, so that they believe that Yahweh, God of their fathers, has appeared to you, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. And Yahweh says to him again, now put your hand into your bosom. And he puts his hand into his bosom and brings it out, and behold, his hand is leprous as snow. And God says, put your hand back into your bosom. And he puts it back into his bosom, and he brings it out from his bosom, and behold, it has turned back to flesh. And it has come to pass, if they do not give credence to you, and do not listen to the voice of the first sign, that they have given credence to the voice of the latter sign. And it has come to pass, if they did not give credence even to the two signs, nor listen to your voice, that you have taken off the waters of the river and poured it on the dry land, and the waters which you have taken from the river have been indeed, they have become blood on the dry land. And Moses says to Yahweh, O my Lord, I am not a man of words either, yesterday or before, or since your speaking to your servant, for I am slow of mouth, slow of tongue. And Yahweh says to him, who appointed a mouth for man? And who appoints the mute or deaf or open or blind? Is it not I, Yahweh? And now go, I am with your mouth, and I have directed you to that which you speak. And Moses says, O my Lord, please send by the hand of another that you send. And the anger of Yahweh burns against Moses. And he says, is Aaron the Levite not your brother? I have known that he speaks well, and also, behold, he is coming out to meet you. When he has seen you, then he has rejoiced in his heart. And you have spoken to him, and have set the words in his mouth. And I am with your mouth, and with his mouth, and have directed you that which you do. And he has spoken to the people for you, and it has come to pass, he is to you for a mouth, and you are to him for God. And you take this rod in your hand, with which you do the signs. And Moses goes and turns back to his father-in-law Jethro, and says to him, please let me go, and I return to my brothers who are in Egypt, and I see whether they are yet alive. And Jethro says to Moses, go in peace. And Yahweh says to Moses in Midian, go, return to Egypt, for all the men who seek your life have died. And Moses takes his wife and his sons and causes him to ride on the donkey, and turns back to the land of Egypt. And Moses takes the rod of God in his hand. And Yahweh says to Moses, in your going to return to Egypt, see all the wonders which I have put in your hand, that which you have done them before Pharaoh. And I strengthen his heart, and he does not send the people away. And you have said to Pharaoh, thus said Yahweh, my son, my firstborn is Israel. And I say to you, send my son away, and he serves me. And if you refuse to send him away, behold, I am slaying your son, the firstborn. And it comes to pass in the way, in a lodging place, that Yahweh meets him and seeks to put him to death. And Zipporah takes up a flint and cuts off the foreskin of her son and causes it to touch his feet, and says, "You are surely a bridegroom of blood to me." And he desists from him. And then she says, "The bridegroom of blood," in reference to your circumcision. And Yahweh says to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." And he goes and meets him on the mountain of God and kisses him. And Moses declared to Aaron all the words of Yahweh which he has sent him, and all the signs with which he has charged him. And Moses goes, Aaron also, and they gather all the elderly of the sons of Israel. And Aaron speaks all the words which Yahweh has spoken to Moses, and does the signs before the eyes of the people. And the people believe when they hear that Yahweh has looked after the sons of Israel, that he has seen their affliction, and they bow and pay respect. For these few words to give thanks, blessed love. So, the story of Moses and God's relationship, and God instructing Moses to go to the Pharaoh and demand that his people be free. And we kind of see in this first section, Moses doesn't believe he can do it. And he says, who am I? People aren't going to believe me. And then God says, well, if they don't believe you, then there's three things that you can do to prove that I am with you. One is throw down his staff, his rod, turns into a snake. And when Moses goes to pick it up from the tail, it turns back into a rod again. And he says, when they see that sign, that they should believe you. And then the next sign, if they still don't believe you, is put your hand into your chest, your bosom. And when he draws out from his cloak, his hand is leprous. And when he puts it back in, pulls it out again, it's healed. Then God says, there's another thing you can do if they still don't believe you after that, is take the water from the sea, from the river, and when you pour it to the ground, it turns into blood. So those three signs should prove to them that your God Yahweh is with you. But then Moses then says, but I can't speak properly. I'm slow of tongue. I'm not the appropriate person. And then it says that actually God gets frustrated and angry with Moses and says, I am with your mouth and I will be directing your mouth. Who is it that gives people mouths and ears, etc. But then he says, your brother Aaron is going to be with you soon. Let Aaron speak for you. And then Moses says, okay, but he's always kind of rebutting. And it actually does say, and it's interesting that, the anger of Yahweh burns against Moses, that Moses is so unconfident that God gets angry with him and he doesn't believe his promise. I think it's also interesting with those three signs that, Moses just knows people are going to be skeptical. So he has to do something to prove the people. And, we are like that, aren't we? We're very, quite rightly, as a streetwise faculty, defense mechanism. But, we want proof of things. And, how do we know when a certain sign is from God, or is it in the interest of the person giving the sign? Are we being, hoodwinked, that kind of thing. And I think it's interesting that God recognizes that in humans, that they're very questioning. But even we as humans, how do we know when certain signs are certain things, kind of thing. But then there's this interesting moment in the middle of the chapter where God attempts to kill Moses. So the section is, and it comes to pass in the way in a lodging place that Yahweh meets Moses and seeks to put him to death. And Zipporah takes a flint and cuts off the foreskin of her son and causes it to touch on his feet and says, you are surely a bridegroom of blood to me. And he desists from Moses. And then she said, a bridegroom of blood, in reference to the circumcision. And then it goes on, and I know one of the interpretations of this, because it's a very curious small section that lots of scholars has really kind of wrestled with. One of the interpretations is that as a leader, and even though Moses didn't want to be a leader, as a leader, he now has to live by example, and he didn't have his son circumcised as he needed to, because that was the covenant. But Zipporah, his wife, recognizes this and gets the son circumcised and then presents the foreskin as evidence. Another interpretation of this is similar to the situation with Aaron, is that God is testing Moses to see whether he is actually worthy to be a leader, even though he's already denied he's a leader and he's tried to put it off. But actually for the whole family is going to be who change. And it was actually a test, but it's a test that Zipporah again passed, recognizing that to become that pointed leadership of the nation, that there were certain things they needed to do, one of which was the circumcision of their son. But it's no means conclusive interpretation, but it is how scholars have tried to make sense of that very small section, and then it quickly goes on and it talks about how Yahweh is engaging with Aaron. But in terms of the narrative, Moses convinces the elders of the Hebrew nation, convinces the people, and Yahweh himself convinces Pharaoh that he is serious about letting the people go, and says that Israel is my first son or firstborn, and if you don't let the people go, then I will kill your firstborn. So everyone's now set up for Moses leading the people out of Egypt, Pharaoh included, and it kind of ends on that cliffhanger to see what happens next. So I'll end the reading there. I don't like these getting too long, but give thanks, blessed love, have a blessed day, God willing, and more readings tomorrow. Blessed love.